Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Laing. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Laing.
Welcome to Finding Certainty, my friend. If you are here and you're a frequent listener, I appreciate your patronage. If you have just stumbled across this channel, maybe for the first time, you're intrigued by this concept of finding more certainty in your life, we appreciate you stopping by, and I'm hopeful that you'll enjoy. I recently heard that we're one of the fastest growing channels on Voice America. And I believe it's because so many of us are seeking to find more certainty in our own lives. It is a hot topic. I had an author and a publisher on my show a few months back named Angel Tessie. She helps people to self-publish their books and turn them into bestsellers. And she did a quick Google search of the word certainty. There were tens of thousands of hits in media just in the last 24 hours of the word certainty. She also, on a whim, searched up the word uncertainty, the negative, obviously, the opposite of certainty, and there were hundreds of thousands of hits in media just within the last 24 hours. This is something about the frame of mind or the mindset that us as Americans, us as citizens of this world, wherever we might live, says something about what we're thinking and how we're feeling if uncertainty is so prevalent and so heavy on our minds. It's one of the reasons I started this show. I believe that to create more certainty in our lives, we have to do three things. First, we have to consider new mindsets, new relationships, new technologies, new ways of thinking, new ways of acting. We need to consider the new. We need to consider alternative approaches. We need to be able to change and evolve. I also believe that we need to link arms and work together. There's far too much division in the world today. We're in this hot political year, and there is and will continue to be significant division. And it's really frustrating to many of us that are peacemakers and team players. We try to work together. We try to be accepting and encouraging. We try to be the bridge between people. I mean, I consider myself a bridge between political parties, between different ways of thinking, different approaches. My mom used to tell me I was a peacemaker when I was a kid. And I think it's important. I think we need more of that in the world. And if more of us could link arms and focus on what we have in common, focus on what we agree on, which, if you think about it, is most things. I've said this many times on my show, that we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. We may disagree on immigration or gun control or abortion or something like that. Maybe there's a few areas that we disagree on. Now, we may feel passionately about those areas, but there is so much more that we see eye to eye on. We want our kids to be safe in school. We want opportunity. We want low inflation. We want clean drinking water, no potholes in the road, healthy food, safety from our enemies. We want so much of the same things. And so why not just agree to disagree? Why not focus on that 90% that we do see eye to eye on, link arms, and get stuff done? That's the second principle, I believe, that creates certainty in our lives. The third is to just keep trying, to not give up, to put our heads down and keep trudging forward. And in the process, we get to where we're going. It's actually the topic of today's monologue. As you know, if you've been following my show for a little while, on the first Friday for every month, rather than having a guest on like I do the other weeks, I do a monologue. And in this monologue, I focus in on a topic that I believe is integral for creating certainty in your life. We started in January this year with the word accountability. B was for balance. That was in February. In March, we talked about composure, which I think is a really important piece of this. It's actually an important piece of today's topic as well, because how we respond to things, how we not just react, but how we think and pause and move a little more slowly and respond effectively and maturely can have significant outcome and significant effect on our lives. In April, we talked about discipline, maybe one of the most important principles or characteristics to create more certainty in our lives. And today, I've decided to do E is for endurance. If we have accountability, if we have balance in our lives, if we're composed in what we do and disciplined, but we don't endure to the end, we don't keep going, we'll never get to where we want to go. We'll never succeed because life is hard. There is a great deal of uncertainty in the world. You may hear a little bit in my voice or see it on the YouTube if you're watching, but I am wiped out. I just did a 5-day road trip driving south from Oregon, visiting my kids. I'm not a great long distance driver. And somehow in the middle of it all, I came down with a cold. Hear it in my voice. I'm struggling a little bit to even talk. But I'm here. I still got up. I got ready for this monologue. I'm here enduring through the show. It's ironic because, as the topic suggests, we have to do this in our lives. We have to keep going, even when the going gets hard. So, speaking of the road trip, it illustrates a few points that I thought I'd make on today's monologue. I was driving home from Oregon. I actually flew up to Seattle last Wednesday and picked up a car that was basically given to me by a friend of ours. It's a nice car. It's a luxury car. But he's a broker. He found it at the auction. He paid very little for it. And he asked me if I wanted it. Well, I'm not stupid. I was bored at night, but it wasn't last night. So I said, absolutely. I flew up to Seattle. He met me at the airport, and I picked up this new to me, used, but new Porsche Cayenne. And it is one of the nicest cars I've ever driven. I was very excited about it. It was at almost zero cost to me. But I, instead of having him just ship it down to me, I decided to pick it up, drive down to Portland, visit my kids, drive to Bend with my son, and then take a little bit of time driving home so I could visit a few customers, my other son in Bakersfield at Cal State, Bakersfield, etc. And then back home here to Henderson. I got in late last night. Well, a road trip is interesting, especially if you're not a great long-distance driver, and I'm not. I've fallen asleep at the wheel once, rolled my car when I was 16, been paranoid about falling asleep at the wheel ever since, so I don't drive long distance well. I stop and take naps along the way. I do short days. It's just not worth it. I have a friend and partner who, she was on our show several months ago, Jill McCauley. She actually rolled her car and has been paralyzed ever since. She's been in a wheelchair ever since she was 18 years old. I got lucky. She had a different experience, a different path to trod. And speaking of endurance, she is an extraordinary example of endurance. However, driving home, I had my challenges. This is an older car. It's got a lot of miles, 2005. And for one thing, the air conditioning wasn't working. My friend Howard, who got me the car, said it was working when they got it and picked it up. He had his partner work through it. It was in the shop, but for some reason the air conditioning wasn't working. And so this illustrates a point that I believe has to apply. It's very important when it comes to endurance. And is that, as I said, life is hard, right? There's going to be challenges. I took this car from him and took the trip to get it and knew I had to drive back, knowing that it's an older car, knowing that it has a lot of miles, knowing that Porsches are problematic. They can be expensive to repair, knowing that I may very well get this car, drive back home, and maybe break down on the way. I didn't know. I didn't know how well it would drive. I didn't know how well it would run. I didn't know if I would have problems. And I actually went into the trip expecting them to happen. I expected it to maybe get all the way back here and for me to decide, you know what, this doesn't work. I'm just going to sell it. As it turned out, the car ran like a dream, and it ran great. I set it at speed, the cruise control at 80 miles an hour, and just cruised. However, when I got out of Oregon, and as I said, I went from Seattle to Portland, took my son to Bend, where he was starting a new job this last Monday as a wild firefighter. So I got to spend 2 or 3 days with him, and then I got on the road. As I started getting down into from Oregon into California, it started heating up. And I couldn't figure out how to turn the air conditioning on. I hit the A button, which I thought would make it work. Nothing. No cold air coming out. I was trying to do phone calls as I worked, so I'd have to roll the windows down, and it would make it loud, so people couldn't hear me, and I'm trying to drive, and I'm melting because it was so hot. And I'm trying to do calls, and it was almost impossible with the windows rolled down. And so I'm like, you should have seen me. The windows were going up and down, up and down, up and down. I'd put them on pause while I listened to them, roll the window down. I'd take it off pause, roll it back up, and try to talk for me. It was really a pain in the neck. But it is what it is, right? And I went into the trip expecting there to be problems. So while it was irritating, it wasn't necessarily frustrating. This is a key, I believe, in endurance in our lives. There is a famous writer that many of you have probably heard of, Dale Carnegie. He wrote a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. He also wrote a book called How to Stop Worrying and Stop Living. And one of his principles that he teaches in this book is that you deal with the worst possible outcome, the worst case scenario. You deal with that in your mind, and then you move on from there. Think about that. If you are worried about something, just picture what's the worst that could happen. Worst case scenario, going into this trip, I thought the worst thing that could happen is the car breaks down halfway. Or worse, I lose my brakes and I crash into the wall. You just picture in your mind the worst possible outcome. You deal with it and say, okay, if that happened, hopefully I don't die. If I do crash into a wall, hopefully I could drive it off the road. If it does die on the side of the road, what would I do? I'd get an Uber to a bus station, maybe to the airport. I'd probably have the car towed, probably sell it. It didn't cost me very much at all. And so, just sell it. It's worth more than I got it for, a lot more. It was practically gifted to me, other than the cost of picking it up. And so that's the first principle I want to share with you about endurance. How do we endure? Well, we go into it expecting things to happen. We expect there to be hurdles. We expect there to be challenges. We expect there to be problems, right? if we don't do that, if we can't do that, we're going to have a hard time. We're going to have a hard time getting to where we want to go if we cannot foresee and expect there to be trials. I think one of the reasons so many people get frustrated and they give up even, they get depressed, discouraged, they even give up. I mean, suicide is a rampant problem in the world. Why do they do that? I think oftentimes it's because they expected something to be different. They expected it to be easy and it's not. They expected it to go smoothly and it doesn't. If we can expect there to be challenges, realize that this life, this mortality as we call it, is going to be fraught with with potholes, with twists and turns in the road, with bumps and bruises and even devastation. If we know that that's going to happen as we go along, I think we'll be much more prepared for when it does. I've talked on the show in the past about having foresight, mid-sight, and hindsight. Foresight, of course, is preparing for the future, or that is preparing for the worst, expecting bad things to happen, expecting there to be challenges. If you do that, when they come, you're not thrown off by them. It's so much easier to say, well, I knew that was going to happen, or I expected something like this to happen, rather than to be surprised by it. Hindsight is where we look back and assess what we went through, the experience, the challenge, the journey, and look at what we learned from it, what we gained, what we could have done better, et cetera, et cetera. Mid-sight, though, is while we're in the experience, having the perspective and the mindset to say, okay, this is where we're at. This is the challenge. I didn't know exactly what would happen, but I knew something probably would. I knew there were going to be speed bumps, as they say. Now, what do we do about it? Not just what do we do about it, but how can I improve it? How can we make it better? How can we learn in the process? That is a critical piece of endurance. Is one, looking forward to the challenges, and two, sucking the marrow out of the experience. Learning as much as we can, gaining, growing, evolving, bonding, working together, and making that experience, good or bad, positive or negative, making it as full and rich and abundant as we can. That one thing, if you took nothing else away from this monologue, can change your life. Trust me on that. My friend Jill, in the wheelchair, who gets more done than most of us, has an amazing attitude. She was just voted as Miss Wheelchair Washington. That's like, I mean, she is in a competition now for Miss Wheelchair USA. It's like Miss America, but for those who are dealing with the disabilities that she has, the limitation that she has, that she does not treat like a limitation. I want to do a shout out to you, Jill. We're so proud of you. Congratulations. You are an extraordinary example of endurance and of someone who keeps these principles in mind, who embodies these principles. No, I remember a hike we went on when I was a kid. I think my parents were there. I was a young teenager. I don't remember everyone who came. I think my brother and sister were, my folks, at least my mom. We hiked to a place called Calf Creek Falls, down in, it's kind of mid to southern Utah, north of Bryce Canyon and Zion's Canyon, a couple of hours. I have thought about this hike so many times in my life and over the last 40 plus years. It was such an experience. Okay, I'll tell you why. There's several reasons why. Number one, it's not a terribly difficult hike, but it does take a little bit to get there. There's a lot of sand on the trail, so it's a little bit hard going. But when you get to the end of the trail, you come to this box canyon with these gorgeous waterfalls and a big pool you can swim in and a sandy beach, and it's shaded, and it's just beautiful. I remember this trip so much, though, because it was hard getting there. The sand was shifting, and you had to just keep your head down. You had to keep plodding forward, just trudging forward. And yet the outcome, the end result, was so glorious that it was almost it was emotional. It was almost spiritual, the experience, because it was such a stark contrast with the difficulty of the trip and the hike, how hot it was, how sandy it was. It was fairly long, but not too long, but it was, for young kids, it was a long hike. And then you come into this shady, beautiful, green, gorgeous box canyon. You could actually hear the mist, or feel the mist and hear the waterfall as you were approaching, and the mist was kind of blowing out down the canyon, so the temperature started to get cool as you got closer. It was such a great example for me of when we do endure to the end, when we do keep going, we don't give up, the result can be extraordinary. And yet, if we had quit before we got there, I never would have experienced that change in temperature, the mist, the beauty of the waterfall, the swim. I mean, we had a picnic. I remember our dog was running around, jumping in the water. It was just such an experience, such a memory of mine. And it was such a stark contrast between the difficulty of the hike and the result at the end. But here's the main point I wanted to make. One of the things that I realized as we went along the trail was there was extraordinary beauty and adventure and opportunity along the way. I remember the contrast between the trip and the end, and the outcome, the trial, or the journey, and the result, the reward. But along the way, there was a creek that we followed that had a little brown trout swimming in it. I remember thinking the whole time, I wish I had my fishing pole. There were Indian ruins up on the hillside that if you had not looked up and noticed them, would have missed them. There were lizards running around, and rabbits, and beautiful flowers. And so one of the reasons I think it stands out to me is I realized that while the trip was challenging, it was hard, it was tiring, it was hot, it was also incredible. And one of the keys to understanding endurance, as I've said, is that mid-sight, not just foresight, planning for the trip and looking forward to the positives and the negatives and being prepared for them. Not just looking back on it and remembering the experiences, but while you're in it, during the journey, remembering to look up. Don't just keep your head down, plodding forward, looking at the sand the whole time. You'll miss out on so much if you do that. In this example, I would have missed out on seeing the hieroglyphics and the extraordinary ruins, or the Native American drawings up on the cliff walls. I would have missed out on seeing all the fish in the river, the rabbits. The list goes on. I would have missed out on, in a very real sense, the biggest, most important part of the trip. And the waterfall was incredible, but the journey was even more so. And I could have missed out on the entire thing if I had been either one, hyper-focused on the trial, or two, hyper-focused on the end result, on the objective. I think it's an important principle in marriage, in parenting. It's an important principle in business. We spend so much of our time looking forward to someday when we'll be successful, we'll have the money, the recognition, etc., when we will have arrived. We look forward to when we'll be retired. Look forward to when the kids will grow up and not be so stupid. We We look forward to things all the time. We're either hyper-focused on the challenge and the problems we're dealing with right now, or a future day that's yet to come. And yet, the greatest gift we can give ourselves and to those around us is the ability to be present, to not be hyper-focused anywhere else but now. It's probably the most important principle. Most definitely one of the most important lessons I can teach you about endurance is enjoy the journey, even when it's hard. Suck the marrow out of it, as Robin Williams said in that classic movie, The Dead Poets Society. Don't miss out on the beauty of the journey, even when you're stubbing your toes and tromping through sand and burning up, and maybe you're thirsty and you're hungry, your back hurts, but stop, smell the roses. We're up against our break. I'm only going to do one break today on the monologues. I don't do two like we do with the guest interviews, but appreciate you being with me today. I'll be right back. Don't go away. Got lots more to share with you about the principle of endurance.
Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today.
If you're a nonprofit in need of funding, we can help. Certainty Management is a cost reduction firm that also helps churches, schools, sports teams, and other nonprofits raise unlimited zero-cost funding. Best of all, you don't have to sell anything or ask for donations. Call 888-684-3122 to learn more today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, T-E-A-M, like Mary.com.
Voice America programs are now available on your favorite connected device, including Amazon, Alexa, and Google Home. Through streams with Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and iHeartRadio, listening to your favorite show is as easy as saying the show name followed by the word podcast.
Hey, Alexa, play Finding Your Frequency podcast.
If that doesn't work, try adding on TuneIn or on iHeartRadio or on Apple Podcasts.
Certainty Management can help create more certainty in your life with our deep discount health insurance options, even for 1099s, part-time employees, volunteers, and more. Pay less to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your team. Call 888-684-3122 for a free quote today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, T-E-A-M, like Mary.com.
Have you become a member yet? Sign up now to become a member of Voice America. It's always free and easy. Plus, you get to take advantage of some great member benefits. Get unlimited access to millions of hours of on-demand content across all of our channels. Keep track of your favorite episodes, shows, and hosts in your own customizable library. Find out what shows you might be interested in based on your favorites. Plus, you get insider access with our newsletter. Membership gives you more. Sign up at voiceamerica.com and click register at the top right.
Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
You are listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Laing. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Welcome back to Finding Certainty. Having a great conversation about the topic of endurance. I believe it's one of the most important principles in life and in business is that stick-to-itiveness, the persistence that it takes to get to where you want to go. Because, as I said before, we go into it and we know it's going to be hard. If you think it's going to be easy, you're going to be disappointed. It's just not how life works. I remember another hike I went on when I was a kid. I did a reenactment with our church of a pioneer trek. You know, the early pioneers crossed the plains. They went through the Rockies. They were going to California and Oregon and Washington and Utah and other places like that. And we reenacted this. We actually had to push hand carts and travel several miles through the desert to get to this camp where we ended up staying for a few days. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. We were exhausted by the end. But in the process, we gained such an extraordinary appreciation for the endurance and the persistence that our forefathers, our pioneer ancestors went through to get to where they were going. What I learned was that, as I was saying before the break, that it wasn't enough just to put our heads down and trudge forward. Now, sometimes we have to, right? It is a strategy. We keep our head down. We just keep moving forward. We feel like we have to do this a lot in life and in work, in our health struggles and relationships and so forth. But and it is a strategy to focus on the mundane, right? Focus on the manageable, one step after the other. Now, we have to avoid as they say, the definition of insanity, right? To do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. Obviously, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just moving forward. Sometimes all we can do is take the next step. If we focus too far ahead or up above, we feel overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. If we look up and around and get distracted by what's coming at us or hyper-focused on what's happened in the past, we can't let go of it, we feel weighed down by it, then that is exhausting as well. It's adding more weight and pressure that doesn't have to be there. But sometimes our strategy does have to be to just focus on the next step. It's simple, right? Anyone can do that. When you're tired, you're weighed down, you can do that. Personally, though, I think there's a value to looking up. Not all the time. Sometimes all we can give is that next step. But if we can look up and focus on the next landmark, that seems to help. I read my goals every morning. I review my bucket list. I review a write-up that I have that describes my perfect life, what I envision as the ideal life. That's me looking on the big picture, focusing on the future. Doesn't mean I don't stay focused on today, but it does help me keep perspective and keep motivated on what could be, on what the possibilities are, what the outcome, the end result of this journey, this step-by-step effort, endurance could be. It keeps me inspired. It keeps me focused. So you need to choose whatever method works best for you. In our Pioneer Trek, we ended up at a camp that was shady. It was by a tree. We made flatbread. We caught fish with our hands. We had incredible testimony meetings. I mean, it was an incredible experience. And I think it was worth it. It was worth just putting our heads down and focusing on step after step after step. But one way we got there was by focusing on the next landmark. I remember our camp mom and pa, they'd say, just let's go for that tree on the ridge there. And we'd get to the tree. And then let's focus on that big boulder. And we'd get to that boulder. And then let's focus on that bend in the road. And we'd get to that bend in the road. And that's how we got there. When the Mormon pioneers arrived, and Brigham Young, the prophet of the church at that time, looked out over the Utah Valley. He said, "This is the place." That didn't mean they were done, though. They had a lot of work to do. And isn't that true? That's another principle, that even as we're enduring, we think we've arrived. We're just starting another chapter of our lives. When you've made a lot of money, now you have to manage it. When you've found that perfect person, now you have to work on the relationship. When your kids are no longer teenagers, you have a whole new set of challenges and problems, blessings, and trials. One of the key things to remember And it applies in our Pioneer Trek. It applied in our hike to Calf Creek Falls. It applies in business and marriage and parenting and so much more, is that we don't have to do it alone. There is great value in the synergy and the strength of friends and family, mentors and teachers, coaches and partners, and more. I've talked in the past about how we may need to go and find that tribe. Maybe we don't have a family that's tight-knit. Maybe we don't have a mentor, but it is not hard to find them. Go volunteer with an organization. Get out and network and meet new people. Find people who you want to be like. They say you'll become the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, go find 5 people that inspire you and encourage you and that you look up to. Spend time with them. Asking for help does not mean you're a victim. In fact, it's one of the most important evidences of you doing what I refer to as the Oz principle. It's from the book, The Oz Principle. It's of not being a victim, not falling to prey to the victim patterns in our life. One of the most important questions, as the Oz Principle teaches, is to keep asking, what else can I do? Well, one of the most important things you can do is ask for help. You know, whether it's our pride or our arrogance, our fear, our inability to delegate, one of the biggest reasons we struggle in life is oftentimes because we're trying to do it alone. This is one of the things I'm working on as a business leader, is learning to delegate, learning to ask for help, and learning to share in the workload. I have an extraordinary team and who continually ask me, what else can we do to help, Patrick? Give us more. And it's hard. It's hard to do. But the more I do, the more easy it is for me to endure and keep going. Good mentors, good coaches, and partners, colleagues, they can truly be the wind beneath our wings. They lighten our loads. They force us to stretch and progress, and they help us get more done. And if we can give up some of the weight. We can focus on other areas that are important to us. Now, relationships are interesting, right? They're some are challenging, some are extraordinary, but they're an important part of endurance. My youngest son is living with his sister, Brighton, and it's been hard for her. She's only 22. She wasn't planning to be a mom, and now she's got a 17-year-old teenager living with her. He was not getting on with his mom, and he moved out, left home. Now his mom and his stepdad are empty nesters, and he couldn't be more happy. But it has been very difficult for my daughter having a teenager live with her who doesn't really report to her. She's not his mother, but she is, in a very real sense, his caregiver or his custodian. It's been hard for her. One of the principles that I've taken to heart is that as we're going through things, whether it's relationships or trials or business or whatever, there's really only 3 responses. One is to like it, one is to hate it, and one is to leave. So you live with something and you like it, you live with it and you hate it, or you live with it, or you choose not to live with it and you move on. As we're going through life and working on our own endurance, we should keep these in mind. We can't change most people. After they're about 3 years old, they are set in who they are, their personality, their idiosyncrasies, their strengths. Now, that's not to say people don't continue to improve. But if we spend our time trying to change someone, change others around us, we're going to be very frustrated, and we are going to be stymied. We're going to be halted in our progression. Our endurance is going to be very difficult. We need to focus on living with them and liking it, focusing on the good, focusing on the effort, the progress, the half glass full, as it were, focusing on the positives. My daughter struggles with this. She seems to be hyper focused on her little brother's shortcomings. And when he forgets to wash a dish or put down the toilet seat or whatever the case might be. And we talked about that. I was up there in Portland this last weekend visiting with her, and I said, it's your choice, Brighton, to choose how you respond in any situation. You can choose to let something really frustrate you or let it go. You can choose to have water off a duck's back or let it really get your goat. You can choose your response in any situation. One of the best books I've ever read, as we've discussed previously on the show, is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He was a Jewish doctor, prisoner of war, Holocaust victim, and he says that the only liberty that can be taken from you, he says the only liberty that cannot be taken from you is the ability to choose your response in any situation. He tells of prisoners who would go through camp sharing their last piece of bread, lifting up the sick and the afflicted, being a light to those around them. It's interesting. And you'd think that they gave up their last piece of bread. They were sharing their food. They were spending more energy serving others. You'd think that would make it less likely that they would survive, but in fact, they were those who came through it. They were those who were survivors more often than not. It's a very interesting principle when it comes to the question of endurance. I think you need three things to truly endure in life. You need faith. That's the forecasting, right? That's the preparation, the looking forward, preparing for what's going to come, good or bad. You need fortitude, which is just the persistence to keep trudging forward. Keep your head down. Keep your eye on the next landmark. Keep pressing forward. I also think you need friends, both friends that can help you and serve you and support you, encourage you, but also friends to whom you give service, to whom you give that last piece of bread, to whom you give of yourself. One of the greatest ways to endure is to try to help others endure in the process, to be a light and example to those around you. For some reason, that rather than it being exhausting and tiring and deflating, it is just the opposite. It fills you with energy and encouragement, and it's extraordinary. I know I'm talking a lot about hiking today, but I remember another hike that we did as young Boy Scouts. I was about 15, 16 years old, up into the Uinta Mountains of Utah. We hiked to a place called Kidney Lakes. It's about a 15-mile hike, as I recall. Long hike, difficult hike. We fished along the way. We tried to suck the marrow along the way. We did have a good time, but it was a tough hike. And we finally got to Kidney Lakes, this lake that we were told was so great. And two things happened. Number one, and this is an important principle for endurance as well. Number one, we got there, we started fishing, and we didn't catch anything. We weren't getting any bites. And we're like, what the heck? This place was supposed to be the best fishing. This is supposed to be a great hike, and here we are getting skunked. And you know what we did is, and this is a critical piece of endurance, we didn't give up. We kept trying different approaches. We tried different spots around the lake. We'd cast out, we'd move down 10 feet, cast out again, move down 10 feet. It wasn't a huge lake. We went all the way around the lake. And finally, we hit a spot where, bam, we got a bite. And then another one, and then another one. And what we found out was there was some sort of spring or something coming into the lake right there. And all the fish had congregated right there. And we caught fish till our arms hurt. We also hiked up a little bit higher to another lake called Rainbow Lake that was nearby and caught more fish there. And it taught me an important lesson that when at first you don't succeed, try again. There was a talk recently at a conference we had for church where one of the speakers, Patrick Laing, spoke about radical reorientation. Sometimes we have to make radical changes. I know Christopher Columbus, when he was searching for the New World, one day he came out of his cabin. He'd been praying, asking for guidance, and he said, "Turn right." And they made a radical turn due west, and they ran into San Salvador. Sometimes radical change is the answer to making sure that our endurance is not just persistent, not just consistent, but also efficient. That's going in the right direction. Endurance in the wrong direction doesn't do you any good. If I'd been driving north instead of south, I would have ended up in Alaska eventually, but I wouldn't have gotten home. We also have to make small corrections. Radical reorientation, recalculating is sometimes an important piece. When I talk about live with it and like it, live with it and hate it, your choice, or leave, that's a radical reorientation. Leaving a relationship, a business partnership, a faith, whatever the case might be, that's a radical reorientation. Sometimes it's the only option. It should be the last option, and it should be an option that we take very carefully, and ultimately an option we consider long and hard before we do so. I think our divorce percentages would be significantly lower if we dealt with the first two a little bit longer and jumped to that third option of leaving a lot more slowly. Anyway, talking about reorientation, though, I think of the example of pilots who are flying their plane. They're constantly, obviously if it's on autopilot, but if a pilot is actually piloting the plane themselves or a car as it's driving down the road, your hands are never still. Think about how you're driving and your hands on a steering wheel. Your hands are never just sitting still, not moving. They're constantly making course corrections. They're constantly making adjustments. We have contingency plans, right? We have to recalculate. And there were several times on my trip where I heard the GPS saying, recalculating. You missed your turn around. Sometimes we can't get back on the exact same spot where we left. In fact, if it's a question of fixing our lives, repenting, forgiving, giving up an addiction, whatever the case may be, we can't come back to the point where we got off the road. And I think that's one of the challenges people run into when it comes to endurance and succeeding in their life is they want to go back to where they started. They want to go back to where they got off track. They want to go back to where it all began. And that doesn't happen. It's not an option. If you understand that as well, rather than going back, but just getting back on further down the road, you've got new experiences and challenges, but you get back on the road. That is the key to making it all work. Momentum is perhaps it's one of the most important things you can remember in this topic. I remember when I lived in Alaska, we went kayaking with a friend of ours out in the bay near Homer, Alaska. And in the middle of it all, I actually got knocked over by a wave, flipped upside down, had to pull myself out of the kayak, get out, get on shore, dry off, and warm up. I mean, the water was ice cold. And I still remember because I had to stand there buck naked in the sun to warm up. It was really embarrassing. But I remember the lesson he taught me. He said, if you keep moving, you keep your momentum going, you're not going to flip over. The wave can't flip you if you're moving forward. In life, in business, in relationships, we keep our head down. We focus on the landmarks. We focus on the future, but stay aware of the present, be present. All of these principles that are so important in enduring in our lives. If we can just keep momentum, just keep moving forward, sometimes slower, sometimes faster, but keep going. I think of Dory in the movie Finding Nemo. Swimming, swimming, swimming. I think she was onto something. It's important to take breaks sometimes. Last night I stopped and slept for a couple hours at a rest stop because I was exhausted. There was even a couple there. They had a table and chairs and a pillow for their dog. They were prepared to take breaks. I think that's an important piece of endurance, keeping balance, as I talked about back in February. Enjoy the journey. Remember the fish along the trail, the ruins we would have missed out on during the Calf Creek Falls hike. Don't just be hyper-focused on the amazing waterfall or vista or result at the end. Make sure to enjoy the journey. The sum result is that all of these things, all of these principles that we've been talking about over these last 5 months, as you start to see them coming together, you start to see a formula for certainty in your life. Being accountable, staying balanced, talking about rests and taking breaks. It's about being balanced, not being out of balance, being composed and controlled and mature, being disciplined, enduring to the end. Ultimately, it comes down to not just getting where we want to go, but becoming who we want to be. If we do it right, we'll accomplish both goals. I appreciate you listening to me today. Thanks for being with me and spending your Friday morning. I look forward to this every week, whether it's a guest or being able to do the monologues. And the monologues do take me more time to get ready for, but I really enjoy them. And I hope you're gaining something from them. These are principles that are not just valuable, not just important. They are life-changing. They're eternal. These are principles that can transform your own certainty experience if you let them. I wish you the very best. Have a great weekend. Thanks for joining me today again. I wish you the very best, and I will talk to you next week. Take care. And bye for now.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Finding Certainty. We hope you've gained some more insight into how to create more certainty in your own business or nonprofit. Join us next week for another taste of the certainty experience. Until then, we wish you greater certainty in all that you do.